Welcome to Coding After Work stream. A big shout out to our sponsor, Progress Telerik, that supports us.
Yes, thank you.
Today, Jessica is going to show us some practical tips to improve our users' experience.
I am.
Awesome. The floor is yours.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us. I'm moving over here now. So there's this old joke about a person who visits the doctor's office, and they're complaining that the arm hurts when they move it like this. And the doctor's response is, well, stop moving it like that then. And that pretty much sums up how Apple responded to the people who complained about the signal degradation on their iPhone 4s. Because if you covered the little bridge against the bottom left corner of your phones, you would get dropped calls and reduced bandwidth. Apple's response was, you're holding it wrong. Now for me, for someone to even suggest that it is the user's fault is, in lack for better words, not nice. Makes me think about a principle, the principle of least astonishment. If a necessary feature has a high astonishment factor, it may be necessary to redesign that feature. Meaning that apps and web pages and such needs to act in a way that most users expect, without surprises. There's a lot of confusion going around when it comes to UI and UX, and some of you have probably seen either this image or that image, or similar ones, where the classic glass bottle of ketchup is UI and the squeezy plastic bottle is UX. I don't agree. But there's also images like this, although usually they show some horrible design and compare it to a good-looking design for the after UX. But let's stick to ketchup bottles because ketchup. But I say you can't just add UX and think that everything will work perfectly for everybody. So I say that both of them is a UI and both of them have a UX. How we use the bottle. So what I'm trying to say here is that even if it's a good experience or a bad experience, it's equally much a UX. It's an experience we're having. I do have a favorite ketchup package, and it's this one. It caters to both those who want to dip their fries and those who prefer squeezing it all over. You can simplify and say that the UI parts relates to the what of the interface and the UX parts relates to the how. Hey, that's us again. As humans, we have limitations. Our sight is limited, our attention is limited, our memory is limited. Designing with those limitations in mind will benefit our users greatly. We will perceive the application as faster, easier, and more intuitive, and even sometimes better looking without you doing anything to the design. Now, in psychology, there's something referred to as cognitive load. Basically, we can compare our brains to a processor of a computer. If we have several processes running at the same time, the computer or our brains will get slower and less responsive. So things like distractions, conflicting information, all of that stuff will pose an issue. Or having too much information for that matter. If we overload the users with too many choices or unnecessary actions, we will derail the user's train of thought. And they might even get irritated, make them slower, or like me, rage quit. There's no way I will comprehend and remember the number like this. But if we break it up into chunks, it's much easier to read. And it reduces that cognitive load. So in a way, shopping, or credit cards more precisely, is a good example of reducing cognitive load. So let's take a form as a more practical example. We have a lot of data and we have a lot of input boxes, but this isn't a horrible one. This is kind of average for what I see. If we put the labels to the left of the input boxes, we get a total of 32 visual fixations. 32 places the users need to look at and read. We're also trained to read in a certain pattern. And in the west part of the world, we read from left to right and top to bottom, kind of in a zigzag pattern like this. By simply moving the labels on top, we've decreased the number of visual fixations for the user by almost half. But we can still improve on this. It's easier for the user if we, first of all, make sure that we only ask what we need. Is it relevant data? What gender I identify with when I sign up for a newsletter or whatever this is, create an account? Probably not. I've also removed age range because we can figure that out from the date of birth, right? And while we're at it, let's change date of birth from 3 dropdowns to 1 input instead. And I ask for a full name instead of a first, middle, and last name. So we still have a few zigzag going on, but we can move it into 1 row. So we have 1 straight, nice row, and we have decreased the number of visual fixations by a lot. We now have 9. But we do have too many to fit our screen, so one of them is actually below the screen. So what we need to do is think about, do we really need to ask for your home address on the registration? Or can we perhaps do that at a later state, like when we need it? Or if we need it, let's split it up into 2 pages instead. Other things we can improve on is being upfront with the user. That will reduce the level of anxiety and stress about how far they are from finishing. And also using a progress indicator encourage the completion and might even get the users to trust you a bit more because it feels like you're being upfront and honest. And if you give your user a little head start, like I have done here, we have a little progress made already, even though we haven't filled anything in, it will increase the number of people that uses the form quite a lot, because that will give you some dopamine, and we all want that dopamine kick. Let's also put a button right in the line of sight going down in a straight line, so to the left. And as a bonus, this is also more accessible to have the button on the left side, because if you are using a screen enlargement tool, you won't be able to see the button at first if you're filling in this form. And also think about how we phrase the action for the button. What does continue mean? Is that continue with creating my account? Is that continue to the next step? Is it continue? I don't know. So let's change that to something very clear. Next step. And honestly, if you are using a progress indicator like this, we could probably get away with calling it just next instead of next step. But I think being super clear is always a great idea. Putting in smart defaults so the user gets some help and doesn't have to think about how you want the data submitted is also amazing. If you look under date of birth, you can see instead of using enter your date of birth that we had before, we are now asking for the format in the format we want it to be in. And the same goes for email address and stuff like that. Letting the user know that they have succeeded is also very powerful, In this case, we put a green frame around the input box. However, to be more inclusive, you should always make sure that there are other ways to figure out what's going on than depending on color alone. So in this case, we add a symbol as well. And I think we can ask Jimmy to show us this in Blazor later on. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Another great tool is to mark the active input box, so I directly know which one I'm filling in. And in our case, we're using a blue frame that is double the size of the original frame. So if you don't see colors, you will still see that something changed. And always, if possible, display the errors before the user submits the form and not in a long list. And let them know where the issue is. And again, to elevate our color accessibility, we put a symbol together with the red color here. Try not to put blame on the user with saying stuff like, you're putting the wrong date. Be as clear as possible. We need to think for the user so they don't have to think, why did I put the wrong format? Or how do you want the format to be in? And so on. So let's change our error message to reflect the input in the format we want instead. So please enter your date of birth and the format. Because when I clicked that and wrote January with letters, my help went away, right? But now we don't. Now we know. So with just a couple of steps, we went from this to this. I mean, there are still things that we can improve on. And by just doing these few steps, we will get so many benefits for the users. Other things that we could improve on is always make sure that the user can exit at any time so they don't have to finish it if they don't want to, so they can opt out. And make sure that they can go back in the UI if they want to change something. Maybe they forgot that you should have used another email or something. And also use contrasting colors for the input boxes. In our case, we are working with a gray background, so we are using white to have that contrast. But if we were doing this on a white background, I would change the color of the form to off-white or gray. Being consistent and not trying to invent the wheel. Don't reinvent the wheel or the wheel. That will also help the user. So following platform standards, industry standards, it's super important because the learnability will improve for the user and it will feel so much easier and faster. This is a leaf, right? At least I read it as a leaf. Jimmy, do you see a leaf?
I see a leaf.
You see a leaf? Mm-hmm. Awesome. But you're not biased.
No.
No. Awesome. So if this was a button, what would it do? Do you know?
Well, we did get a really good suggestion. I believe it was defriend or something like that, because leave me alone.
Yeah. So it could be a cancel button.
It could be.
Because you're leaving. Yeah, no, bad jokes. It's not. This is a symbol from a learning management system at a school I teach at. That was create new message. Perhaps not the clearest symbol. And honestly, I didn't understand it at first. And Tibby think it looks like a beef. There you go.
What kind of beefs are you eating, Tibby?
Oh, one of those with a bone on that we...
Right,
the fancy ones.
Okay, fair enough.
I see it. I see it. Mm-hmm. It could be a beef. So it goes both with vegetarians and not. So this was create new message. And I honestly didn't get it at first. I mean, it's embarrassing. But in my defense, other part of the system was using this symbol instead everywhere. And they did change it eventually. And I think it was supposed to be a quill, or perhaps shows that it's eco-friendly. I'm not sure. Or that they were hungry for a tomahawk. Could be. I'm not sure. I'm glad they changed it. The problem with create new is that we have more than one standard. Twitter uses both a plus sign and a quill, and Outlook is using a pen. We have documents, we have leaves and beef. I mean, there's no real standard here. And being this inconsistent will slow the users down. We're probably talking like a second or a few hundred milliseconds, but all those milliseconds, they add up. So if possible, avoid using different symbols for something that is already established. Issues with going too far outside of the standards and convention is an issue not only when it comes to software, actually. It's also found in the real world. Are you supposed to pee here, or are you supposed to wash your hands? For those that usually sit down during the business, these makes no sense. And for those who usually stand up during their business, it feels vaguely familiar, and some accidents may have happened so many times that they actually put labels on them because they were tired of washing out, I think. So, consistent. This is from an airplane, back when we could actually fly or travel. This is an in-flight entertainment system. I went into their game section and I started a game. And up to my right, you can see a pause button. And then I go back, same system, same seat, same everything, and I start another game. But now the pause button is moved to the left. The other one was on the right. And we are creatures of habit, so there's high risk that we won't even see the button if we keep moving it to unexpected areas. So don't let your UI elements wander around, because like it or not, if there is a standard, we need to stick to it. If we want the users with us, of course. Hierarchy is also important for so many reasons. For example, it will reduce the cognitive load that we talked about earlier. Now, this one, Jimmy does not like this one.
I don't.
Every time I show this to him, and he's seen this multiple times, he hates me for it. Because as humans, we don't read pages or apps, we scan them. And that makes hierarchy very, very important. We need to figure out what is the most important feature of our application, or what's the most used, for that matter, which hopefully is the same thing, of course. What's the least important thing? Do we even need to have it on the screen at all times? And so on. So here's another example. We have a page with a list of posts. And the first thing we can do is use proximity to make it easier for the user to see what header belongs to what preview text, because that's not really clear here. So let's do that. There you go. And then we need to think about what is it that we want to show the user. Do we want them to find a post, click it, and read it, right? So let's make this subheader stand out a little bit more. And in our case, we are going to decrease the size of the preview text because they were the same size and it's still readable. And if it doesn't read that well, you're supposed to go into the post to read it anyway. And now when we have a little bit more space, we can afford to move the post down a little bit from the page header. So we get a little bit separation there. So what else can we do to show hierarchy? Well, it might be that all of the posts are not of the same importance. So let's change that. Now it's kind of clear that the bottom 3 ones are not as important as the top 4 one is, which is really good for people like me that is usually in a hurry or too lazy, because then I know that you have prioritized either the newest or the most important thing on the page. So if I don't have time, I can just scan the bottom 3. So let's click on one of these posts. So here, again, we need to ask ourselves, what's the least important thing on this page? I would say that it is the header. We clicked it before on the other page because we wanted to read more about it. But how often do we intend to actually read the header while we are on this page? Once is probably enough, maybe 2 times. Yet we keep giving the header the biggest, loudest font of the whole page. So let's fix that. Now the change in hierarchy is kind of clear. Now it's the subheader that are the most important part of the page. And they are important, but they're not that more important than the text itself, right? So now I changed them to the same size, but I used bold instead. So we don't have to be overly dramatic if we don't want to or need to. So the one on the right side, the after, looks like something that I would actually read because the content seems important. But on the left side, we have 4 in-your-face element, and I'm one of those who keep reading the 4 elements all the time instead of reading the actual text when it is like this. And this is called interference. Now, if you want your user to navigate through your interface with ease, we need to design things in a way that we take advantage of that natural human cognitive process. So we need to reduce that interference that I talked about. If it's arranged in a way we understand and the hierarchy is very clear, we will lower the cognitive load because we don't have to think about that. You have probably seen examples like this before as well. It is not that hard to read out the written color when it's colored in a neutral or congruent color, right? But when the color of the text is incongruent to the written color, we get that interference and we have a harder time processing it. We can still read it, but not as effective. It takes more CPU, so to speak. Here's another example of interference. Now, in the west part of the world, we associate red with stop and green with go. Therefore, we get a slight conflict here. And I don't know how many times I have read go on the green one and stop on the red one because I get mixed up. Giving the users clear instructions and clear error messages makes all the difference in the world. All of us make mistakes, stuff happens, and the users, they will understand that unless you put up error messages like this. Now, this makes me as a user wonder what I should do. Should I press OK? Should I unplug the machine? Should I don't know, throw it out? Because it is a catastrophic failure, right?
Get a cat.
Get a cat? Catastrophic failure? No, you didn't.
Of course I did.
He did. I'm sorry, he did.
That's my job today.
Oh, it's your job? Uh-oh. Catastrophic failure. No, I would not get a cat. I don't think that means... You mean they want me to buy a cat because I failed getting a cat?
I assume so.
Yeah,
Do we
I'm
have
not
a cat?
sure. It's not clear. It should say get a cat. Yeah, and it doesn't. This is from a bank. It's not that clear what they want me to do, but they send me this warning triangle. But it just says close and null, null. Not helpful. I don't know what to do. Is my bank account closed? I hope not. And these ones. Remember these? Yeah, they come in different flavors. They are less scary today, but they don't say that much to an average user. And there's been research done that has found that poorly designed error messages triggers a physical stress response in our brain by raising our cortisol levels by getting a bad error message like this. So if we look at this 404 page as an example here, what makes a good error message? Well, it uses plain language that the user can understand. And they kind of are here in places, but it's also a bunch of tech jargon. So if I don't understand it, I can actually get a little bit scared or hesitant because I don't understand it. So let's remove that, all the tech chat. And I also removed the outline of the error message to make it more, make it look like a page instead of an error message that has been thrown. We also have no buttons, no URLs, or any suggestions how to fix your problem or what to do next. So a good error message is actionable, like even a retry or a home or something that we can do.
Get a cat.
Get a cat. Yeah, that would be a very clear message. I'm going to get so many get a cat messages from Jimmy's apps. I think he's trying to say something. Mm-hmm. But we can also put in a search box depending on the design of our page or what type of page we are. And here you can also see what I refer to as before, because we have a white background, I'm using a light gray input box here. Or we can put a way to get back to the start page. That's an easy one to do. Now the message itself should also be short, because it's kind of overwhelming to have to read all that text. And honestly, does anyone read all that text? I don't. I think my mom does, though. But it doesn't add to the clarity either way. And explain to your user how to fix it if it's fixable. In this example, we get a bunch of uncertainty because it might have been removed, it might have changed the name, it might be on temporary unavailable. But does that mean I can simply do a refresh and it will be solved? Or when will the page be back up again? Will it be back up again ever? Is there another option to do whatever I tried to do? Like get a cat? Sometimes
we have a comment.
We have a comment?
So Frederick apparently read the entire text.
I'm so sorry, Frederick. Was it clear? Are you getting a cat? Now, sometimes we can't actually fix the problem, but we can give options. So first of all, let's make the URL blue so it actually looks clickable. We can also use buttons if that's something that we are using in our design as well. And I added a few other URLs to pages that I think can be of interest to the user. So Jimmy can go buy cat food for the cat that we haven't gotten yet, or even catnip. Mm-hmm. But if we have a shop, we could add sale items or images of most bought stuff or anything we can do here. And this is kind of smart because we can upsell ourselves, but the user will feel like you were very helpful and less of a failure. So that's nice. Never put blame on the user. Be humble about it. Because honestly, it's not the user's fault that we didn't cover every possible way things can go wrong. And I mean, we can't really. In this case, they are not directly blaming the user, but they are not taking responsibility either. And using words like error or something went wrong or failed will inadvertently put some blame on the user, and they will feel that they did something either wrong or stupid.
I really hope that dc.com has something like, you failed this thing.
But that's an arrow message, not an error message.
I like it.
Oh no, I'm doing bad jokes.
No, that was not a bad joke.
When did this happen? I'm sorry. But that was a good one, wasn't it?
It was.
Yeah. Let's remove the red that is also associated with an error warning in our case, because it feels a little bit scary. And let's make it bigger for clarity so we know what's most important. We couldn't find the page. And also, let's be humble and own up to the issue. It's me who can't find whatever you were trying to find, even if the user misspelled something. And be true to your brand, in this case, a cat. A very sad cat. And be human. And it's also okay to make jokes and be funny and be witty and all of that, as long as we also fulfill the other 5 points. So by doing these 5 steps, we elevated the error message quite a bit, I would say. And this, of course, is not only true for 404 pages, it's all the error messages. So we can follow the same steps. You don't have to put in a cat if you don't want to. Unless you're Jimmy and want me to buy a cat.
Mm-hmm. Unless the error is catastrophic, then you actually need to put in a cat.
Yeah, there you go. I really like this quote from Bill Buxton. We must adopt an approach that inherently aspires to the right design as well as get the design right. I would say that think about your users. Try to remember that there are a user at the other end of your vast backlog. And think about what your app is best at. What's the most important thing? And use hierarchy to convey that. And think about what's least important. Can we remove it completely? Can we put it on a secondary page to reduce the cognitive load? Perhaps we can put it in a hamburger menu or something like that. And also, of course, think about how you are communicating with the user. When something goes wrong, keep it clear and understandable. And with that, we got a few tips. Mm-hmm. I know Jimmy has a Blazor project with a form.
I do.
Do you want to load it up?
I can do that.
You can fix that one, and I go over here. So we can see how we can improve on that.
How we can improve on that. So my plan was to create a whole suite of different components that could do all the things that Jessica talked about. Now, apparently there are only 24 hours per day. Apparently. And about 20 of those I'm currently working, something like that. At least
Speaking
it feels
about
like that.
a vast backlog.
Yeah, exactly.
Which also is on fire.
Yeah. So I haven't had time to do all the things, but I want to show you something that came with .NET 5, which is kind of nice. So we're going to take a look at the...
We do have... is that one? We have a comment. No? Oh, there we go. We have a comment. You can actually get up to 25 hours if you have high enough caffeine intake, I would say.
I can...
He's trying.
I can... pretty sure I can say that is not true.
He has tried.
Let's pop into my Blazor project. Let's see here. There it is.
Busted, yeah.
So the Blazor project I've built here is just a very, very simple project, and I built a couple of components that is actually in Blossom.net, which is the component library that we are currently building. So with .NET 5, or actually I should say with Blazor, we have a Blazor component that has an edit form up here. So the edit form is going to be rendered just as an ordinary form, nothing special. We just don't need to add an action or where it's going to post. It's just going to handle those things for us. I'm supplying it with a model, which is the entity that I want to edit. Then we have just an ordinary div. In this case, it's a bootstrap class on it. I'm adding a label, which has the class form label and the name of the label or the text that I want to show. Then we have an input text, for those of you who have worked with Blazor before, this is nothing new. So we have an input text that is giving us a couple of really useful things. One of those things are when we add validation, it's going to show a green box if it's okay, or it's going to show a red box if it's not okay.
And that came with Blazor.
Yes. And as Jessica shown pretty early in the presentation, just having a red box is not enough for those who are colorblind, for example. Then we add a validation message, and we say that we want the validation message for the model full name. So we're gonna add a data annotation validator. So the data annotation validator is going to take the data annotations and validate them, kind of in the name. So we have on our class, this is called form class, we have a couple of data annotations. So I'm going to say that I require that the user is going to supply me with a full name. I require an email address, but I also say that I want it to be an email address. That's important to me. So it's going to validate that whatever text I'm supplying is actually an email address. So in here, inside of the edit form, I'm going to add data annotation validator. So what is happening in the background is that the edit form has something called an edit context. And the edit context is it's using something called a cascading parameter. So it's going to send that edit context to every component that is currently listening for an edit context. In this case, it is the input text, it's a validation message, and all of the other. In this case, I have a bunch of input messages, input text and validation messages, as well as an input date, for example. So if we pop into our web browser, I'm going to reload that page, you will see that we have a full name, email, date of birth, address, and address too. If I write something, apparently I've written Jessica at some point, you will see maybe, hopefully it will show on the screen as well, it's going to turn green. And if I write something that is not an email address, I'm going to get the error message, the email field is not a valid email address, and as well have a red box around there. But first of all, this doesn't look that great, does it?
I'm glad you said it and not me, because I thought you designed this or something.
I have designed this.
Ooh.
I made this.
I have a presentation you need to see.
I've only seen it twice. So it doesn't look that great. So what we have to do is on every input text or date or whatever component we have, we need to add a class. We need to add the form control class. But what I've built is something called a custom CSS class provider. Let's take a look at what that does. So with .NET 5, they gave us the ability to add our own CSS classes to whatever component that uses the edit context. So in this case, I am listening for a cascading parameter, which is the edit context. And on that edit context, I'm going to run the setField CSS class provider. Now, I could have done this in code, but I rather have these kinds of things in the Blazor syntax. So I'm going to say setField CSS class provider and send in the provider. What I also have done is that I've created a bootstrap field CSS provider. So what it does is it has something called a get field CSS class, and depending on, for example, is the field modified, is the field valid or not, it will set different classes. And in all the cases, it will also set the form control. For some reason, my pen isn't working. All right. My battery just gave up on me, I think. So here we have the form control. So in every instance, if it's okay, if it's not, as long as it's listening to the edit context, it's going to set the form control. So let's go back to our class here, or our Razor component. So what we're doing here is that we add the custom CSS class provider. We're setting a provider type. In this case, we're setting the bootstrap field CSS class provider. I don't think I could have chosen a longer name.
No, I don't think so.
I'm going to save that. We're going to pop back to our browser, and boom. Now we have everything with the label first and then the text. We have, let's write something here.
Wow.
You will see that we have a very clear green box and a checkbox.
Yay, checkbox.
Checkbox.
We also have a comment.
We also have a comment.
This is also one of the clearest switch expressions examples I've seen.
Oh, thank you.
Nice.
Same thing with email. If we write something and it's not the right one, it's actually going to show a very clear X as well, and it's going to be red. And actually, I didn't know that this was actually built in as well. But as you can also see, the current field is blue.
Yeah.
So I got that one as well.
Yeah, I approve.
So it's kind of a very, very simple way to get all of these things, because these things are built into Bootstrap. So why not use the power of Bootstrap, if you will? So I've heard many people say that, well, I don't want to use Bootstrap. Bootstrap is I'm not going to use that word. Is not that good.
That's what they said?
The meaning of what they said. So, but since the Blazor template are using these kinds of things, they're using Bootstrap, I built something that could actually use those components right out of the box. And if you take a look at this class, I mean, we could pretty easy change this to whatever we need in when it comes to other frameworks as well. Now, this has been a part of Blossom for a while now, but I actually never added any documentation for that. I do have it on my blog though, so engstromjimmy.com. So we have the custom validation class attributes. So this is how you use them, and as I mentioned, it's part of blossom.net. So you can go to Blossom, blazm.net, or to the blog if you want to. Do we have any more questions? Please ask them. This is the example I wanted to show you. So if you have any question about that or anything else, maybe a question to Jessica.
I just broke my computer, I think. I was trying to paste the URL. You broke it, didn't you?
Yep.
Oh, there you go.
I did.
I think you have to paste it, because I don't know what you did to this computer to act like this.
I don't know.
I have no clue.
Yeah, just skip that.
Yeah.
So let's pop back to our full camera.
So engstromjimmy.com
Yes.
was the link I was
Engstrom.
trying to. It's doing something. It's blinking, and
see
so
it, yeah.
I think my laptop did something.
Now, listen.
I need a new one.
You got the latest one. It's my turn.
But it's old now. It's I don't know, a year. It was before last
no,
Ignite.
You're not getting a new one.
But it's a catastrophic failure.
Then get a cat.
So cat or new computer.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. See you in a week, I guess.
Yeah. Looks like that. Awesome. Thank you, guys.